Living alone in the house I had shared with my late husband, I found solace in the routine of household chores that kept me grounded. My name's Helen, a 65-year-old retiree who had recently hung up her office attire for the last time, looking forward to a well-deserved break after decades of the 9-to-5 grind. The house, a large 2-story building with rooms echoing memories of family gatherings, required constant upkeep. But I took pride in keeping every corner spotless and every garden plant thriving. My life, though quiet, was punctuated by visits from my 2 children. My eldest, a daughter named Anna, led a busy life with her husband, and they remained childless by choice, focusing on their careers. My youngest, David, however, had given me 3 wonderful grandchildren aged between 5 and 12, who brought a whirlwind of energy into my tranquil existence whenever they visited. One crisp afternoon, as I was dusting the living room filled with photos of happier times, an unexpected knock startled me. I wasn't used to surprise visitors, especially since my circle had grown smaller over the years. Opening the door, I was met with the sight of David, his wife Carol, and their kids, their faces a mix of excitement and exhaustion. "David, what a surprise! Why didn't you give me a heads up?" I'd asked, my voice tinged with a mix of joy and dismay. David shrugged, a nonchalant gesture that didn't sit well with me. "Mom, you're my mother. I figured we could just pop by." His words stung more than I expected. The open-door policy I'd always maintained for family now felt like it was being taken for granted. My thoughts were soon drowned out by the chorus of "We're hungry, Grandma," from the grandkids, who were already making their way to the kitchen, a space where I'd spent countless hours preparing family meals. "Let me get you all something to eat then," I said, masking my feelings of disappointment with a smile. Turning to Carol, I added, "Could you lend a hand with dinner?" Carol, who had made herself comfortable on the living room sofa, barely glanced my way as she responded, "Oh, I don't think so. I'm here on a visit after all." The air seemed to freeze around us. David, witnessing the exchange, chose silence, a decision that spoke volumes. Frustration boiled within me, but the eager faces of my grandchildren looking up at me cooled my rising temper. "All right, no worries. I'll handle it," I conceded, turning back to the kitchen, a battlefield where I was both general and foot soldier. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the kitchen, I found myself embroiled in the laborious task of cooking dinner for 6. The process was both a physical and emotional drain, each chop and stir a reminder of the unexpected burden that had fallen upon me. Yet the thought of my grandchildren's smiles propelled me forward, their well-being my top priority in the midst of this family upheaval. As we gathered around the dinner table, the fruits of my efforts laid out for all to see, the children's eyes sparkled with genuine gratitude. "This is awesome, Grandma. Thank you." They chorused, their innocent enthusiasm a balm to my weary heart. Carol, however, remained unimpressed as she picked at her food with a look of distaste. She finally let out a dismissive sigh. "Honestly, Helen, I've never understood how anyone likes your cooking," she remarked, her words sharp and cutting. The room fell silent, the children's joyful chatter coming to an abrupt halt. I glanced at David, hoping for some semblance of support, but he remained silent, his gaze fixed on his plate. The weight of the moment hung heavily in the air, a tangible reminder of the growing divide between us. Once the children were put to bed, their laughter and footsteps fading into the quiet of the night, I knew it was time to address the elephant in the room. "David, Carol, we need to talk about how long you're planning to stay," I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil churning inside me. David met my gaze, his expression one of resignation. "A few months, Mom. I lost my job and we can't afford our own place right now," he admitted, the words heavy with a mixture of shame and defiance. The news struck me like a physical blow, the implications of their extended stay sending waves of panic through me. Yet despite my own fears, my first instinct was to help. "I might be able to speak to my old boss. He's always looking for reliable people," I offered, clinging to the hope that I could alleviate some of our shared burden. David's response was immediate and sharp. "No, Mom, I'll find something on my own," he said, his pride evident in his tone. Then I turned to my daughter-in-law with a mute question. Carol's laughter cut through the tense atmosphere, her disdain palpable. Work? No way. I'll be staying home with the kids. It's enough of a job as it is, she declared, her words dripping with entitlement. The conversation left me reeling, the disparity in our perspectives clearer than ever. As I lay in bed that night, the house quiet around me, I couldn't help but feel trapped in a situation with no easy way out. My desire to support my family was clashing with the growing realization that my generosity was being exploited, and I was left wondering how I could possibly navigate the months ahead without losing myself in the process. Waking up to a house full of people had become my new normal. The once quiet mornings were now filled with the sounds of my grandchildren getting ready for the day, their laughter and chatter a stark contrast to the silence I had grown accustomed to in retirement, yet as much as I cherished these moments with them, the reality of my situation weighed heavily on me. The daily routine had become a relentless cycle of cooking, cleaning, and trying to maintain some semblance of order. Carol seemed oblivious to the chaos, her days spent scrolling through her phone or watching TV, while David disappeared each morning with a mumbled looking for work, only to return in the evening no more hopeful than the day before. For one particularly taxing afternoon, as I was elbow-deep in dishwater after preparing lunch, I couldn't help but voice my frustration. Carol, could you possibly help with the dishes? I've been on my feet all day, I asked, hoping for even a small gesture of assistance. Carol looked up from her phone, her expression one of mild annoyance. Really, Helen? I'm sure you've got this. It's not like you have anything else to do, she replied, her voice dripping with disdain before turning her attention back to her screen. The dismissal stung, and for a moment I stood there with the soapy water and the pile of dishes in front of me blurring into a symbol of my growing resentment. It was clear I was alone in my efforts to keep the household running smoothly. David's return that evening did little to lift the atmosphere. As we sat down to a quiet dinner, the tension was palpable. David, have you had any luck with the job hunt? I ventured, hoping for some positive news. He shook his head, his frustration mirrored in his tight expression. Nothing yet, Mom, but I'll keep trying, he said, a note of defeat in his voice that tugged at my heartstrings. Despite the day's trials, I sighed, the weight of their situation settling over me like a heavy blanket. Well, what do you expect us to do, Helen? It's not like jobs are just falling out of the sky. Carol snapped, her patience clearly worn thin. I hurriedly turned the conversation to the children's need for stability and routine. I understand it's tough, but we need to think about what's best for the kids. They need structure, especially with school starting soon, I replied, my concern for my grandchildren's well-being at the forefront of my mind. But it didn't seem to bother David and Carol much. It was well past midnight, and sleep eluded me once again. My thoughts were a whirlwind, spinning around the endless cycle of chores and the mounting tension between Carol and me. Deciding a glass of water might calm my restless mind. I quietly made my way down the hallway towards the kitchen. As I passed the living room, a faint murmur of voices stopped me in my tracks. David and Carol were up, their low conversation punctuating the stillness of the night. Curiosity piqued, I paused, straining to listen without making my presence known. I'm telling you, Carol, we need to figure out a way to stay here permanently. Mom's got this big house all to herself. It's wasted on her. David's voice was a conspiratorial whisper, a tone I hardly recognized in my son. Carol's laugh, cold and uncalculating, sent shivers down my spine. Oh, please, like she needs all the space. We're doing her a favor by staying. Plus, think of all the money we'll save. My heart pounded in my chest, their words slicing through me like a knife. The audacity of their plan, the blatant disregard for my feelings and my home was staggering. And the savings, Carol. Mom must have a decent stash tucked away. It's not like she's using it. We could really use that cash. David continued, his voice greedy. A stranger to the son I thought I knew. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My son plotting to take advantage of me, to lay claim to the home I had built with my late husband, and even eyeing my modest savings as if it were his due. Steeling myself, I stepped into the living room, flicking on the light. The look of shock on their faces was almost satisfying, but the pain of their betrayal was too deep. "What on earth are you two thinking?" I demanded, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. David and Carol scrambled to their feet, the guilt evident in their expressions. "Mom, it's not what it sounds like. We were just—" David began, but I cut him off. "No, I heard enough. Planning to take over my home. Eyeing my savings like vultures. Is this why you really came here?" My words were laced with disbelief and hurt. Carol, ever defiant, tried to justify their conversation. "Helen, you're overreacting. We're family. We should be helping each other out. You have this big house and we're struggling. What's so wrong about thinking of the future?" "The future? By plotting behind my back? By considering my hard-earned savings as your bailout?" I retorted, the anger rising in me. The conversation spiraled into a heated exchange, with accusations and denials flying back and forth. But the truth was clear. My son and his wife saw my home, my life's work, not as a sanctuary, but as a resource to be exploited. Over a breakfast that no one seemed to have an appetite for, I broached the subject that had been on my mind since that fateful night. "David, Carol, we need to talk about your plans," I started, my voice more steady than I felt. "What about them, Mom?" he asked, a hint of defensiveness in his tone. "It's clear to me that staying here isn't working for any of us. It's straining our relationship, and frankly, I can't keep living like this," I said, laying my cards on the table. Carol snorted, her disdain barely concealed. "So what? You're kicking us out." I sighed, the weight of the decision heavy on my heart. "I'm offering a solution. I'm willing to give you a sum of money, $5,000. It should be enough for you to rent a place for a couple of months and give David a chance to find a job," I proposed, my voice firm. David's eyes widened in surprise, and for a moment, he seemed to consider my offer seriously. "Mom, that's a lot of money, are you sure?" he asked, a glimmer of the sun I knew peeking through his recent attitude. "Yes, I'm sure. It's for the best. I want you to have a fresh start, but not at the cost of our family's bond," I replied, hoping my words would get through to him. Carol, however, laughed mockingly. "Babysitting money. How generous," she sneered, her words dripping with sarcasm. I ignored Carol's jab, focusing on David. "Think of it as a stepping stone. I know you're capable of turning things around. This is just to help you get on your feet," I encouraged, trying to instill a sense of hope and independence in him. David nodded slowly, his expression softening. "All right, Mom, we'll take the offer. It's more than fair, and I appreciate it," he conceded, a rare moment of humility in his recent behavior. Carol seemed about to protest but held her tongue, perhaps realizing that this was their best option under the circumstances. The day they left for the airport, the house felt eerily quiet. I busied myself with cleaning, trying to erase the traces of their stay, but the silence was a stark reminder of the void their absence left. It was only 3 hours later, when my phone rang with a call from my eldest granddaughter, Diana, that the silence was broken. "Grandma, Mom and Dad left us at the airport and flew to Hawaii," she said, her voice trembling, confusion and fear evident in her tone. My heart stopped. The desperation of the solution I had offered had turned into a nightmare I hadn't anticipated. They had taken the money meant to rebuild their lives and abandoned their children to escape to the resort. As I rushed to the airport and called the police, a flurry of emotions engulfed me. Anger, disbelief, but above all, a fierce determination to protect my grandchildren from any further harm caused by their parents' selfish actions. The ride back home was filled with a heavy silence, punctuated only by their occasional sniffles. My heart ached for them, their confusion and sadness palpable in the cramped space of the taxi. Once we arrived home, I ushered them inside, settling them on the couch with blankets and hot cocoa, a small attempt to provide comfort in the midst of the chaos their parents had wrought. "Grandma, why did Mom and Dad leave us?" Lily, the youngest, asked, her big eyes searching mine for an explanation I was struggling to formulate. I sighed, taking a moment to gather my thoughts before responding. Sometimes adults make very bad decisions, sweetheart. But I want you to know you're safe here with me, always, I said, my words feeling inadequate, but the sincerity behind them seeming to offer a modicum of comfort. Jack, more perceptive of the trio, looked at me with a maturity beyond his years. Are they coming back for us? He asked, his voice steady but his concern evident. I met his gaze, my resolve firming. For now, let's focus on being together. We'll figure things out one step at a time, I replied, not wanting to burden them with the uncertainty of their parents' actions. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, an effort to distract them from their worries. We talked about school, their friends, and plans for the weekend, anything to bring back a semblance of normalcy. The next morning, I was determined to take action. I reached out to a family lawyer, explaining the situation and seeking advice on how to protect my grandchildren. The lawyer was sympathetic, offering guidance on the steps we could take to ensure their well-being. I also made a call to my daughter Anna. Despite the early hour, she answered on the first ring, concern immediately evident in her voice. Mom, what's wrong? Anna asked, her voice tight with worry. It's about David, Carol, and the kids. I began, the story pouring out of me, the disbelief, the anger, and the fear for what lay ahead. Anna listened in stunned silence, her occasional gasps a testament to the shock she shared. This is unbelievable. How could they do something like this? Anna's voice was tight with anger. Don't worry, Mom. I'll be there as soon as I can. We'll figure this out together. Her words were a balm to my frayed nerves, the promise of support a beacon of hope in the turmoil. Thank you, darling. I don't know how we got here, I admitted, the weariness seeping into my bones. We'll get through this, Mom. We're a family, and we stick together, Anna assured me, her determination echoing my own. The days that followed were a blur of phone calls, meetings with lawyers, and long conversations with Anna about the future. The children, despite the upheaval, began to settle into a routine, their resilience in the face of adversity, a constant source of amazement and pride. The calm that had settled over the house with the children finding their routine was abruptly shattered 2 weeks later. The doorbell rang one sunny afternoon, an innocuous sound that now filled me with a sense of dread. I hesitated before opening the door, the memories of the last unexpected visit still fresh in my mind. There stood David and Carol, tanned and looking remarkably relaxed. Mom, we're back, David exclaimed, stepping inside as if nothing had happened, Carol trailing behind him with a smug smile on her face. I stood there stunned, unable to fully process their return or the casual manner in which they announced it. Back after what you've done. My voice was a mix of disbelief and anger. David shrugged, a gesture that infuriated me even more. Yeah, we needed a break, but we're here now. Where are the kids? The audacity of his question, the expectation that everything would just go back to normal, pushed me to the edge. You left your children at the airport, David. You abandoned them to go on a vacation. I couldn't keep the accusation out of my voice, nor did I want to. Carol rolled her eyes, dismissing my outrage. Oh, please, Helen, they were fine. We knew you'd pick them up. What's the big deal? The big deal. I echoed, my voice rising. You neglected your responsibilities as parents. You left them scared and alone. That's the big deal. David seemed to sense the seriousness of the situation for the first time, his casual demeanor slipping. Mom, we thought. You thought wrong. I cut him off, my decision clear in my mind. I can't let you just walk back into their lives as if nothing happened. Before they could respond, I made my way to the phone in the living room, dialing the number with a trembling hand. The police have been involved once. They would need to be involved again. What are you doing? Carol asked, her tone shifting from dismissive to alarmed. I'm calling the police, I stated plainly, my finger pressing the call button. You need to understand the seriousness of your actions. Mom, wait, let's talk about this, David tried to protest, his voice a mix of confusion and fear. There's nothing to talk about. You've made your choices. Now you need to face the consequences, I replied, the operator answering on the other end as I explained the situation to the police. David and Carol exchanged panicked glances, finally realizing the gravity of their actions. They attempted to plead their case, to argue that they were the children's parents and had every right to take them back. But it was too late. The police arrived shortly, and the conversation that ensued was short and to the point. David and Carol were taken into custody for abandoning their children, their protests falling on deaf ears. After they were gone, I sat down, the adrenaline fading, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Anna arrived later that day, her support unwavering as we discussed what would come next. The children, when told of their parents' return and subsequent departure, were surprisingly stoic, a testament to their resilience and perhaps a reflection of their own understanding of their parents' failings. The final chapter of this tumultuous period in our lives began with a court ruling that was as harsh as it was justified. My son David and his wife, Carol, were stripped of their parental rights due to their blatant neglect and improper performance of their duties as parents. The judge didn't mince words, calling their act of leaving the kids at the airport not just irresponsible but criminal. They now faced the very real possibility of serving time, a consequence of their actions that seemed to finally bring home the gravity of their neglect. As I sat in the courtroom, listening to the judge lay out the case against David and Carol, a part of me still couldn't believe it had come to this. My son, the boy I raised, facing a sentence for abandoning his own children. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but one that was necessary for the safety and well-being of my grandchildren. With David and Carol's parental rights terminated, the path was clear for Anna and her husband Jan to step in. They had been a constant source of support through this ordeal, and their willingness to adopt the children was a silver lining in an otherwise dark cloud. "Mom, it's official. We're starting the adoption process," Anna told me one evening, her voice a mixture of excitement and nervousness. I hope we're doing the right thing." "You are," I assured her, my heart full of gratitude for her and John's generosity. "You're giving those kids a chance at a stable, loving home. That's more than David and Carol ever did." Anna nodded, her determination clear. "We're going to make sure they never feel abandoned again. They're going to be part of our family, officially." The children, for their part, were slowly adjusting to the idea. The promise of a permanent home with Anna and Jan brought smiles to their faces, smiles that had been too rare in recent months. The day the adoption was finalized felt like a new beginning. We celebrated as a family, a unit strengthened by the trials we faced and overcome together. The joy in the children's eyes as they hugged Anna and Jan, now their official parents, was a balm to my soul. Sitting in my quiet living room later that night, I reflected on the journey we'd all undertaken. It had been fraught with hard-taken challenges, but it had also brought us closer together. The children were safe and loved, their futures bright with possibility. And while the pain of David and Carol's betrayal lingered, the knowledge that justice had been served and that the kids were in good hands allowed me to look forward with hope.